folks. This morning we're going to talk about the next type of tissues. Now, before we've already talked about the epithelial tissues, right? Today we're going to talk about the muscular tissues and the nervous tissue. Okay. Now, the muscular tissue, muscle tissue. Its whole purpose for muscle tissue is that it is going to contract. Now, I want you to be careful though, because you're going to hear this a lot. Muscle cells, or sometimes referred to as muscle fibers. So if you hear me say the word muscle fiber or muscle cell, those two are interconnected. They're the same thing, okay? Because this muscle cell doesn't look like anything you've ever seen as far as a cell. It doesn't fit that mold of that nice, pretty round, pretty cell with the nucleus in the center and all that gobbledygook. It doesn't look like anything you've ever seen before, okay? But the whole purpose of muscle cells is to contract, okay? Now, there are three kinds. The first one's really easy because it's the one that most people think of when they think about muscle. Okay? It's called skeletal muscle tissue. Okay? Now, skeletal muscle tissue here, is connected to your skeletal system. Okay? It's attached to bones. And it is voluntary. Now, what does that mean? Well, voluntary means you have conscious control over it. So if I think I want to move my arm or blink or twist my head or breathe in, breathe out, that is conscious control, isn't it? Or I'm moving, yay, right? Anything like that, that is conscious control. Even blinking my eyes. I think about it and do it, okay? Now, that's a good thing. We want conscious control over these things. Now, this type of skeletal muscle tissue, if you look at the cells, they don't look like any kind of cell you've ever seen. They're actually very long and cylindrical. They're also striated. What does that mean? Striated means they have stripes. So striations mean stripes. So these cells have little stripes in them. And they have a lot of nuclei. They're multinucleated, okay? So when we look at skeletal muscle tissue, this is what it looks like. Now here's the drawing, and here's the actual picture. Now if you look, and I'm going to blow it up a little bit so you can see a little bit better, you can actually see this whole one thing right here is a muscle cell, called a muscle fiber, same thing. So is this, so is this, so is this. And you'll notice there are a bunch of nuclei all in these individual cells. But you notice right here, these little stripes going up and down the sides, these are called striations. These striations are there for a reason. We'll talk about that when we actually get to the skeletal muscle, and we talk about the muscular system and why it does what it does it for, okay? We're just kind of hitting the highlights here. But this again is skeletal muscle. It's real easy to identify because you have these striations and multinuclei. But this is a cell. Doesn't look like a cell that you've ever seen before, does it? So please be careful with this, okay? That's why I said these are weird looking ones, okay? They're not the standard, here's this nice pretty round cell thing. They don't look like that. They're very elongated, they're striped, they have several nuclei, but their whole reasoning is to contract, to go from this length, to contract, so you can move what you need to move, okay? So that's skeletal muscle fibers, skeletal muscle tissue, skeletal muscle cells, whatever it is, it's all the same basic stuff, okay? Now the second kind is called smooth muscle tissue. Well, what the heck is the difference between skeletal and smooth? Well, smooth kind of tells you a little bit about it. Guess what it doesn't have? It doesn't have any stripes, no striations, okay? Smooth muscle doesn't have striations, doesn't have the stripes. It only has one nucleus, uninucleate, okay? It doesn't have multiples. And its shape is more of a spindle shape. It's big in the center and comes to a point on each end, okay? That's what a spindle is. So these are kind of odd looking shaped ones. So when you start thinking about them, how do they work? Well, they're not like skeletal muscle where you can move skeletal really quickly. These are slow moving cells, okay? It's involuntary, which means you don't have any control over it. It's found in the walls of your internal organs, the digestive tract, blood vessels, and even the bladder. Now think about it. When you swallow something down, right? Say you've all done this. You swallowed something too big, or you swallowed a Doritos or something. You didn't chew it up good, and you accidentally swallowed some ice. You feel it going down your throat, your esophagus, down your stomach. it takes forever, doesn't it? It's like, oh my gosh, would it please go down? Would it please go down? And you can actually feel it slowly going down. You don't have any control over it, and it's very slow. Smooth muscle is a slow contracting muscle, okay? So it's unlike skeletal, which is very quick. You can move skeletal muscle very, very quickly, can't you? You can't with smooth muscle. And again, you'll find it, digestive tract, some blood, the blood vessels, the bladder. And again, you don't have any control over these, do you? You don't have any conscious control. They do it on their own, which again is a good thing. We want these organs to have that unconscious, you don't have to think about it to work. Otherwise, if we fell asleep, we'd all be in trouble, wouldn't we? Okay? Now, when you look at it, here's the drawing, here's the actual picture. You can actually see they're elongated like this. They have a nucleus in the center. And you can kind of figure out why they would be kind of slow. There's no real super structure to them, is there? When it contracts, they pull very slowly. But they do work, okay? They're just very, very slow types of cells. But they do their job. They still contract and relax. It's just much slower than skeletal. And again, you don't have any conscious control over it, okay? Now, that's the second kind of muscle. The third type, there's only one place you'll find it, and it's called cardiac muscle. Cardiac muscle is called cardiac muscle because it is found only in the heart, okay? And it's kind of weird too. It's kind of halfway in between the other two. All right, it's got branching fibers, and it's got things called intercalated discs. What the heck is an intercalated disc? We're going to show you in a second, okay? It's also involuntary, which is good again for us. We don't want our heart to be voluntary, do we? Because next time we'd fall asleep, we'd all be in trouble. They have a single nucleus, okay? They are striated, so they have striations. They're involuntary, and they have one nucleus, okay? So you notice a pattern here, don't you? I hope you see the pattern, okay? And when we look at it, it's kind of odd, isn't it? It's got, I'm going to pull it over here so you can see a little bit better. It's got a single nucleus per one, but you see how it kind of splits off in places? It kind of splits off. And then every once in a while, see these little dark bands here and here? You see the striping normally. But right here and here and here, and in a couple of places there and there, and there's these structures called intercalated discs. You'll only see the intercalated discs, you'll only see them in cardiac muscle, okay? And they're there for a reason, which we're not going to get to right now. We'll get to the cardiovascular system. But that intercalated discs help them do their job, okay? And that's why you'll only see it in cardiac muscle, okay? Now again, only one place, in the heart, okay? All right, pretty straightforward there, isn't it? So again, if you look at skeletal muscle, right? Skeletal muscle has striations. It is voluntary and has multiple nuclei. Smooth muscle is involuntary, no striations, right? One nucleus. Cardiac, one nucleus, striations, right? It branches though. It's definitely involuntary, thankfully involuntary, okay? Now, that's the thing though. These three types of muscles all have their own specific job, but their job is to contract. And they're moving something, right? Cardiac is moving blood. Skeletal is moving bones, moving the body. And then smooth is moving stuff like in your digestive tract. We're all still moving stuff because we're contracting, and that's what they all do. Now, we also have nervous tissue, right? And again, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on nervous tissue here other than to be able to identify some of the things, because when we get to the nervous system later on, we'll definitely get into the nervous tissue in greater detail, okay? But nervous tissue is there basically in the brain, in your spinal cord, and in your other nerves. That's where you'll find it, right? The majority of it in your brain and spinal cord, and then all the nerves that come off of your brain and spinal cord, okay? Now you'll find these pretty much all over the body because again, all the way up to your tips of your fingers, to the tips of your toes, you've got nerves flowing through there, right? Your brain and spinal cord are in one obvious place, okay? But nervous tissue has a function. It's to send and receive signals. And there's two basic types, and I do mean basic, types of cells. Neurons and neuroglia, okay? Neurons are the ones that are sending cells, signals, impulses, okay? So when you feel something, you touch something, you feel it, neurons are sending that signal back and forth. When you smack your toe and you feel that pain, neurons are the ones sending those signals, all right? They're conducting nerve impulses. Well, there are other cells called neuroglia. Neuroglia are what we call helper cells. They support and nourish the neurons. So the neurons are the ones actually sending in the signals back and forth, whereas the neuroglia are helping the nervous system do its job. They're feeding them, they're doing a bunch of other things. And there are several types of neuroglia, again, we're not going to get into just yet. And they all have their own function, and we'll talk about it when we get to the nervous system. But those are the two different types. Now again, when you look at them, they're odd-looking little cells too. For example, here's a picture of nervous tissue. You see these little dark colored dots? These are neuroglia, all these little blotchy things. But this guy right here in the center, which kind of looks like a squashed bug, right? Some critter that's gotten squashed with all these little legs. This is a neuron. This is a nerve cell. Okay? You got a nucleus in the center, you got the cell body, and you got all these little extensions coming off of it. This is a neuron. Okay? Again, there's some greater detail in that, which we'll get to a little bit later, but not right now. But these processes that come off, so it looks like something splattered, doesn't it? This is a nervous tissue picture, okay? You've got the two basic types, neurons and neuroglia. The little neuroglia, the little black dots, purple black dots. Then right here, this whole big thing is the neuron. This is the one that's sending and receiving signals. These little fellers are helping this guy do its job. Whatever that job may be that they're doing it, okay? Again, we'll talk about specifically what their job is later, okay? We're not going to talk about it right now because this is more for the nervous system, okay? So that's the next two basic cell types, and you should have your notes for these as well, okay? All right, we'll see you later.